the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
There's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're doing a deep dive into something pretty significant that was just announced. It involves college athletics, specifically the University of Pennsylvania, the former swimmer Lia Thomas, and a resolution agreement with the Department of Education.
That's right, a really noteworthy development.
So our mission here is to sort of break down what this agreement actually says, look at the reactions, some really strong reactions from key people, and understand the background that led us here. We've got a stack of recent reports, direct statements, stuff that really sheds light on how this is unfolding.
And it's probably worth mentioning up front, the sources we're looking at today, they do tend to reflect the viewpoint of those who see this resolution as, well, a positive outcome for women's sports.
Yeah, that's an important piece of context for you listening. These pages have some pretty compelling perspectives you'll want to hear.
What's really interesting, I think, is how this agreement represents a direct federal intervention right into the NCAA's usual territory regarding transgender athletes.
Right, stepping into their autonomy.
Exactly. And it could signal a specific way of interpreting Title IX's protections based on sex in sports. It takes the conversation from, theory and debate to actual actions about fairness and competition.
Okay, that frames it really well. So let's get right into the core of it then, the big news. UPenn reaches this resolution with President Trump's Department of Education. What does that actually mean for Lia Thomas and for the university? Like, practically speaking, according to the agreement.
Well, practically, it means UPenn has agreed to strip Lia Thomas of all the titles won while competing on the women's team.
Wow, okay.
And beyond that, the university is also set to issue an apology for allowing Thomas to compete as a female. That's part of complying with this resolution.
And Title IX is the backdrop here, just for anyone needing a quick refresher.
Yeah, exactly. Title IX is the federal law. It prohibits sex-based discrimination in education programs that get federal money. This agreement essentially interprets the sex protection in Title IX to mean biological sex when it comes to competitive sports.
Which is a specific interpretation.
It is, and it's different from how some sports bodies have handled eligibility before this.
Okay, that's definitely significant. And like you'd expect, it's drawn some powerful reactions from people really involved in this whole discussion. One is Paula Scanlon, right? A former UPenn swimmer. What was her take on this?
Her reaction, based on the reports, was pretty immediate and very emotional. She apparently said, "Wow, that's the first thing I have to say about this. Just wow."
Oh, you can almost hear it.
Yeah. And she expressed a lot of gratitude towards the administration, saying something like, "I have quite literally gotten exactly what I voted for," suggesting this fixes things from the past few years. She apparently got quite emotional, saying this is exactly why we fought so hard for this. She sees it as a real win for, the next generation of female athletes.
That definitely sounds like it carried a lot of weight for her. And then there's Riley Gaines, another prominent voice, former University of Kentucky swimmer, also competed against Thomas. What does she have to say?
Gaines' reaction was very much along the same lines. She highlighted the role of President Trump and the Education Secretary, McMahon. She said, "From day one, President Trump and Secretary McMahon vowed to protect women and girls, and today's agreement with UPenn is a historic display of that promise being fulfilled."
So seeing it as follow-through on a promise.
Right. She emphasized that this administration vigorously insists on that equality being upheld, and she expressed hope that it sends a message to schools that they will no longer be allowed to trample upon women's civil rights. For her, it seems this agreement brings back hope for female athletes to get the dignity, safety, and fairness they deserve.
It really sounds like a pivotal moment, certainly from their perspective and for their advocacy work. Now, Secretary McMahon, who announced this resolution, called it a turning point.
Yeah.
What more did McMahon say about the agreement?
Yeah, Secretary McMahon really framed it explicitly, called it truly a pivotal moment in the battle to defend women's rights in sports from radical gender ideology.
Okay, so using very specific language there.
Very specific framing, yes. It highlights the administration's particular viewpoint on the underlying debates about gender identity and competitive fairness. In the press release, McMahon credited President Trump's leadership, saying UPenn agreed to apologize for past Title IX violations and ensure women's sports are protected there going forward for future female athletes.
So, apology for the past, protection for the future.
That's the message. McMahon wrapped it up by calling it a great victory for women and girls, not just at Penn, but all across our nation.
Okay. Let's give our listeners a bit more context, maybe. Can you just briefly outline the background that led up to this? Leah Thomas's time at UPenn, the controversy around it?
Sure. So Leah Thomas really became a major public focus back in 2022 because of her swimming on the women's team. Reports from around that time suggest that UPenn had, allegedly pressured some women swimmers not to voice objections to Thomas competing with them.
Pressure reported.
Yeah. And there were even reports of alleged threats if they spoke out about feeling uncomfortable with Thomas in the women's locker room.
Okay.
Thomas then, went on to have a lot of success, broke records at the NCAA championships that year. And those events really were a direct catalyst for Riley Gaines becoming such a prominent activist against transgender athletes in women's sports.
Right, connects directly back.
Absolutely. So this agreement we're discussing is, in many ways, a direct response to that specific period and the widespread concerns it raised.
That really helps clarify the timeline and the specifics.
Yeah.
Now, beyond the athletes and officials, reports mentioned social media, particularly X, was full of reactions.
Yeah.
That was the broader vibe there.
Yeah, the reported reactions online, especially on X, were largely celebratory, at least from the viewpoint of those who opposed Thomas's participation.
Okay.
For example, Clay Travis from Outkick congratulated Scanlon and Gaines for speaking out when, as he put it, others stayed silent. Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA, he emphasized UPenn submitted to the Trump administration and listed the outcomes. Keeping men out, revoking titles, the apology letter. He even added a comment like, nobody wants to be the next Harvard.
Interesting comparison.
And Seth Dillon from the Babylon Bee, he commented on how unlikely this might have seemed just a few years back, saying, what was lost and broken is now being restored.
So a sense of reversal or restoration?
Exactly. These widespread reactions really underscore just how polarized and emotionally charged this whole issue is. It reflects divisions far beyond just the athletes, across politics and culture.
Absolutely. Okay, so bringing it all together then, what does this all mean for the future of college sports, for this ongoing discussion around fairness and inclusion?
Well, this agreement definitely sets a significant precedent, doesn't it? We've heard the emotional impact on former athletes like Scanlon and Gaines. They see it as, a culmination of their fight to protect women's sports.
Yeah, a validation for them.
And Secretary McMahon, as we heard, explicitly called it a turning point for defending women's rights in sports, hoping for that renewed dignity, safety, and fairness. The fact that this comes directly from a federal department with this specific interpretation of Title IX, that could really influence how other schools handle these things moving forward.
Right, how they interpret and enforce Title IX, especially around eligibility for women's teams.
Exactly.
So that leads to maybe the final thought for you listening. As these definitions and policies keep evolving, how do universities and colleges navigate this? How do they balance their responsibilities to all athletes?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Ensuring equity, ensuring competitive integrity. How do institutions manage both, especially now? It really makes you think about the ripple effects, how agreements like this might impact other schools, other sports organizations down the line, something to keep an eye on.